Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Career Switch, Is Coding Right for You? My name is Amanda Murray, and I'm a director at Awesome Inc., and I will be your moderator today. So before we go any further, I want to review the functionality of the webinar. So right now, I have everyone on mute to avoid background noises that may distract you from listening. However, you can still interact with us throughout the webinar by clicking on the Interact button at the top. You can raise your hand if you want to ask a question. You can tell us to speed up or slow down. And throughout the presentation, you can send questions to us at any time using the chat box. So before I pass the baton to Nick Such, I'm going to take a quick poll to see who we have in our audience. Okay, so we are now closing the poll, and it looks like the majority, oh no, we're split. So 33% said they've made a couple websites, 33% said they can probably change the font color on their blog, and then another 33% said they are totally brand new. So that's helpful to see. I'm now going to pass it over to Nick.
All right, thank you, Amanda. So thank you everyone again for joining us today. I'm excited to get to chat with you all about our Web Developer Bootcamp. First, I want to start off with a little background of who I am as the director of Awesome Inc., and we'll get more into who you are as someone considering this program and share a little bit more about how the Web Developer Bootcamp works. So for starters, the way I got into this, into software development and now teaching classes in software was not exactly a linear path. I studied mechanical engineering in college, which lends a lot more to working on the insides of cars than working on the insides of the code behind applications. I took one CS class in college, but I had actually been doing web development on the side since I was in elementary school. Dabbled in a few different things, made a few websites, and ended up having one of my most transformative experiences working on the solar car team at the University of Kentucky. And there is where I discovered something that lends a lot into the way that we teach our classes. Working on a project, such as building a solar-powered car from scratch, about 40 of my fellow students. Really, that project experience outside the classroom really shaped a lot of the way that I have learned and that we've taught our classes here at Awesome Make You for the past several years. Since then, I've been involved in a few startups, Awesome Touch, doing large format touchscreen software, and Building Layer, doing kind of the indoor GIS side, building indoor maps inside buildings. And then since 2013, I've helped over 800 people learn to code as part of Awesome Inc. So why are you here? One of the big reasons, as you may have heard, there's a little bit of a talent shortage when it comes to software development and qualified folks in that field. Maybe you're hoping to become a programmer. Maybe you've, as some of you said in the poll, you've done a little bit of programming, maybe worked on a few websites, but you're not sure how to do this professionally, how to transition into that career. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. So as we look at kind of this idea of a career path, one of our co-founders here at Awesome Inc. is really big into medical education. He just finished up his residency after helping us start Awesome Inc. Is actually in Africa right now preparing to work with Doctors Without Borders. And he talks about the idea of physicians. And if you think of kids who've dreamed since they were young to become a doctor, then they start off and they're the ones who are volunteering at the hospital. They study pre-med or biology in college. And then you go off and you apply to medical schools. And if you get into the top medical school, then maybe you can perform the best in your class and get in and match for residency at the top programs. So in something like medicine right now, at least, there tends to be somewhat of a linear career path. That's how a lot of people get into something like that. For a lot of other fields, though, that's kind of a myth at this point, especially when it comes to software development. It turns out that a lot of great software developers, people who are leading companies these days, starting their own, are not necessarily the people who programmed from a very young age and then studied computer science and have been doing this their whole life. A lot of people studied something else and then along the way learned a little bit of programming on the side, maybe worked on a little project, dabbled in it, and then eventually found themselves in the middle of this career. So we're going to talk about a slightly more formal way of doing that, this rise of the of bootcamp programs. So again, kind of back to you, where are you in your life and in your career? So a few things that we've heard from folks who've been applying to the bootcamp tend to be maybe unhappy or just not getting everything they wanted out of their current work situation. Maybe they're feeling underutilized, like they have a lot more to offer. Maybe you don't feel like you're making the impact that you had hoped. Maybe what you're working on doesn't get to reach around the world and change people's lives. Maybe just your interest in what your current career, the industry that you're in, just doesn't excite you as much as something maybe using technology. And maybe you feel like there's just not this room for you to continue to grow in your career, whether that's in terms of impact, responsibility, or even your income. So now is the time to kind of think about your next move. And a lot of this comes from introspection, understanding your own strengths and weaknesses. As we were talking to folks again about the boot camp, this is an opportunity, and we believe that everyone can learn to code, but we don't think that it's something that everyone should necessarily go into. Again, I think there are a lot more people in the world who could become professional software developers, but one of the things that we wanted to clarify as you're considering this is that it's not for everyone. There are a lot of great careers out there. This just happens to be one, and one that we're particularly interested in and seeing lots of demand for. So it's important to start off by understanding your own strengths and weaknesses. Also do some research. Read what it's like to be a software developer. If you have any friends who do this professionally, it's a great time to chat with them. Here in the Lexington area, there are several local users groups, things like the Ruby users group, the Kentucky JSUG JavaScript users group, lots of professional meetup groups to talk with others who are in the field. That gets onto the networking side. And finally, we encourage you to try it out. There are a lot of great free resources out there. One of them that we'll talk about if you do apply to the bootcamp and progress is something called Codecademy, which is a great way to do some practice on your own, and countless other ways to just see what it's like. It's a lot easier to try out programming on your own than maybe, say, underwater welding or something a little harder to dive into. There's some great resources out there, too, if you haven't, using something like StrengthsFinder or the Myers-Briggs test. That's something that we use internally for our team. Helps us to understand all of our own strengths and weaknesses, and then as we put our team together here at Awesome Inc., it helps us to understand how everyone works together. So now that you've had a chance to think about those things a little bit, you're here, you're ready, this career switch is something for you. But now the question is, of all the different things that you could dive into, why should you learn to code? So one of the reasons we look at this is that there are far more jobs than there are people going into this area. So if you're like me and many folks I know, you carry around a smartphone in your pocket. And that smartphone is only as smart as the software on it. And that software has to be built by someone. And right now, especially here in the US, we're seeing the growth in demand for that software far outpacing the growth in the people who know how to create software. And that's true not just around the US, but Kentucky as well. So what is Awesome Inc. and why did we create this bootcamp program? Awesome Inc. exists to help people who have ideas turn those ideas into reality. We call a lot of those people entrepreneurs. And we've been working with entrepreneurs for the last 7 years. And in that mission, we've, in the last year alone, we've served 55 different startup companies. And one of the reasons that we got into computer programming and providing these lessons is that more and more of these companies that we worked with are not building kitchen widgets. They're not getting into things like real estate. They're building technology products, and these cross all sorts of industries. So those are things from healthcare to manufacturing, even the equine industry. And a lot of these companies also are raising funding. And a lot of that funding goes to hiring new team members, particularly software developers. So we're seeing that not only in the companies that we work with, but from small startups to large companies here in Lexington and throughout the state of Kentucky and beyond. We started Awesome Inc. in 2009, and in 2013 is when we started Awesome Inc. U, which is where we began teaching our programming courses. Also in there, Brian Rainey, our CEO, he and I have worked on a few different companies together. I mentioned a few of those earlier. But if you have any more questions about those and our experience and why we are so passionate about that, glad to answer those at the end. We've been teaching some other coding classes for the past several years. So we've had quite a few students go through our Week of Code summer camp. We've also worked with some younger students in our academy, which is where we've had some of the top high school students from the region. It really blows my mind what these young kids can do and how quickly they pick things up. And it's really fed into our desire to work more with adults. Once, our younger kids here have driver's licenses and things like that, our workforce here in Kentucky is going to be set. But we've got really a strong demand right now. One of the classes that we started for adults was our membership program, which was a one-night-a-week class. And several of the folks who took part in that said, hey, we need something more intense. And that's part of what led to our boot camp. We've got a quick video that we'd like to show you all that talks a little bit about that. And I think Amanda is going to bring that up, so we should see that here in just a second. All right, everyone. So for those of you on the phone, we're switching back from the video now. So there's a little more information on a few of the folks who've either been through our programs or have worked with us as instructors in the past. One of those people that you saw in that video was John Newton. And John's story is another thing that inspired us to start the boot camp. So John came to us with a background doing astronomy research. He was originally from Kentucky, but had moved up to Canada for graduate school and was actually using radio waves and telescopes to find new stars. But he wanted to move back, and it turns out there weren't a whole lot of astronomy positions available here in central Kentucky. And while he liked being in technology and science, his skill set just didn't apply for the job openings that he saw. So he'd been working in the catering field. My wife is a dietitian and works in catering, so nothing against catering. That just wasn't what John wanted to be doing. So he came to us and dabbled a little bit in programming on his own, said, hey, I want to get a job in this. He worked with us through our membership program, and over the course of 3 months, we set John up with some projects, some challenges to complete. He built his own web application that did some fitness tracking and some competitions between different users. And after that, through our connections here in Lexington in the tech industry, we had one of our instructors who worked at eLink Design and knew that his company was hiring. We set John up with an interview, and in about 3 months, he went from not being a software developer, not having a computer science degree, to being employed in the field. And we saw that in just a short amount of time, with the right lessons, the right kind of project work, that it is possible to make a career transition like this. So John's story has really been an inspiration for us in bringing this opportunity to folks just like you. This idea of a software developer boot camp is a somewhat new thing, but it's not brand new. Since 2013, we've seen a rise in the number of boot camps around North America, as well as the number of students who participate in those. In 2015, so last year, we saw about 16,000 students who went through bootcamp programs, and around the country, there are around 40,000 students every year who graduate from computer science programs. So between 16,000 through boot camps, 40,000 through traditional CS programs, this really is a growing way to get into the software development field. The program here, our boot camp at Awesome Make You, is a competitive program. So for this fall's cohort, we only have 10 spots available. We've already seen lots of applications come through and have begun some of our interviews. So we expect this to be a very competitive process as we make our selections over the course of the next month. The application process begins with an online application. So from our website, awesomemakeyou.com, just click on the button there that says Bootcamp, and you'll be guided in to fill out the online application. It's pretty quick, takes about 5 to 10 minutes. Just gets us introduced to who you are. After that, the next step is an in-person interview with our Awesome Make You team, where we learn a little bit more about you and why you want to get into this field. Finally, it concludes with what we call a figure it out challenge. So we want to see not what you know already. Again, we aren't expecting people to be coming into the boot camp with a computer science degree. What we do want to make sure is that you are ready for the type of intense, rapid learning that will take place over the course of our 12-week program. So that's what that FIO challenge wraps up with. And I think it would be remiss not to mention this, but our application deadline is this Friday. So if you are thinking about applying and have not yet, make sure you get that in by this Friday. Looking beyond a boot camp, because really this is a 12-week program, our mission is to get you out there into the field. So we need to talk about the career prospects out there. And there are a couple important things about being a software developer. Job demand is very high. We're seeing software developers working in a variety of industries, not just technology. And a few great things that have happened because of this. One, wages for software developers, even those who are just entering the field, start off pretty high. So here in the Lexington area, salaries may be a little lower than they are on the coasts. On the coast, you may see things breaking 6 figures, even for starting developers. Around the Midwest, where the cost of living is a lot lower, you can keep a lot more of that in your pocket. We're seeing starting salaries in the range of $50,000 to $70,000. The second piece is that these jobs tend to exist inside a great company culture. So we typically see things like software developer, web developer, terms that, depending on the company, are used interchangeably. These are ranked high in terms of things like job satisfaction. You get to work in great teams and great work environments on interesting, meaningful projects. We mentioned this is not something happening, or just around the world and on the coast. Even here in Kentucky, the stats that we're seeing are over 3,000 open computing jobs. We get a few emails a week here from companies in town who are just adding to the list of software development jobs that they're working to fill. And these are growing faster than a lot of other careers in the state. And one of the great things about our bootcamp program is because we have a small class size and we have such high demand for web developers, once you complete our program, we guarantee that you will get a job within 6 months. One of the things that we're working a lot on, we have a lot of companies who say, hey, we'd like to have someone right now. So there's a lot as we go through the program where you'll be meeting with our employers before that program is even finished. A few of those employers, a couple you may know nationally. You've probably heard of Facebook and Google. We actually have some alumni of our internship program here at Awesome Inc. Who work for both of those companies. So If that is something on your list, they're a little harder to get into, very, very competitive. But there are folks from right here in Lexington, Kentucky, who are working out some of those big names that you've heard of around the country. Even here in Lexington, we've got great companies like Apex Software, Dell Software Solutions side, Hewlett Packard, as well as some smaller, newer companies, Big Ass Fans doing some really cool stuff, as well as local startup Make Time is getting a lot of buzz lately, and they've really been growing their team. We have some other awesome connections too, so not only for those companies that are already out there, but for those companies that you haven't heard of yet, those small, fast-moving, fast-growing startups. We've gotten to know a lot of those teams and continue to through our awesome fellowship program, which is an incubator for early-stage technology startups. We also have some great connections with the bigger companies in the region, since we run the Kentucky Entrepreneur Hall of Fame, which serves to recognize some of the most successful companies started by people from Kentucky. These are the big names that you hear out there, the Yum brand and the like. So one of the things that you may be considering is going back to college in that traditional 4-year path. It's possible that if you have another degree already that you could go and make use of some of those credits, maybe get through a bachelor's degree in computer science instead of in 4 years, maybe in 2 years. But it's still a very expensive and time-consuming option. Our goal with the boot camp is to pack in about 2 years worth of education into 3 months. So this is a very small amount of time. And having another college degree is not a prerequisite for the boot camp. The things we care about are your desire to learn, your desire to dive into these things, and your ability to solve problems, to work together with a team, and ultimately to learn how to code. We know that $9,500 is not a small investment. We do hope that it's more affordable than some of the other options that are out there. But this is a full-time commitment for those 3 months. And our goal, again, is to get you into that new career. Hope that you will get a great return on your investment in your education. A couple of pieces of our program, the way that we run things. One, as I mentioned in the beginning, from my experience with the solar car team and working on a real-world project, the things that I was able to learn in that have guided us in our program to favor projects over lectures. There are some things that we can only effectively deliver when you're first diving into new things in that format, but our goal is to help you build up a portfolio, because we want to start to establish that feedback loop. We want you to be able to know how the quality of your work is and know how you can make it better. At some point after our 12 weeks together, you're going to be out there, and you won't be totally on your own. You'll have people around you, but you're going to be out there, and we want you to be able to learn that next new thing. Because if there's one thing I know about software development, there is going to be a new JavaScript framework. There's going to be a new platform out there beyond mobile. There's always going to be something new. And really the true skill that we are teaching in the bootcamp program is learning how to learn. A few of these things that you will learn, some of the specific skills. First, we'll dive off a little background in computer science. Again, we don't expect you to have that background already. From there, we will get into things like front-end web development, HTML, and CSS. We use JavaScript, as well as Python, which is our core back-end language. We get a lot of questions around that. Why did you choose this language over that? Ultimately, there are 5 or 6 different options out there. You see the words Rails, PHP, Node.js. And in talking with our employer partners in the area, what really matters is that you have a portfolio of work. They've seen that you've been able to build something from idea to application out there in the wild, and it's not uncommon for software developers to have experience in several different languages, especially working in consulting software development. You'll be using whatever new language a client comes to you with. But our goal is to give you that nice, solid foundation and a lot of the skills, both on the front end, back end and the deployment side of building web applications, as well as understanding how to work in a team. That's a big thing that we've heard from our employer partners. They aren't looking for people who just want to sit alone in a dark room. They're looking for team members who can be part of a team of software developers, cross-functional teams with designers and marketing. And so those are a few of the things that our employers have been looking for as well. Finally, who are our instructors? Who's actually going to be teaching you these skills in software development? There are people out there in the field. A lot of the candidates that we've actually looked at are people who currently work for our employer partners. So it's quite possible that your instructor for this cohort of the bootcamp program could be your future coworker. These veteran software developers, they're people who've been out there in the field, who've been building things day in and day out, so they know some of those pitfalls that you're just not going to read about in any textbook.
So, Nick, we have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do applicants need a college degree for the bootcamp?
No, they do not. Yeah, that's not something that is required on our end from the bootcamp. There are a few jobs out there, particularly if you wanted to be a software developer at a university, that unfortunately they still kind of require a degree, usually in computer science. We see a lot of gripes about that in message boards, because really they eliminate about half the candidates. As I mentioned, a lot of people get into this field, whether being self-taught or working their way up through a company. So there are a few jobs out there that will affect your ability to get a job in. One of the things that we're working with our employer partners in is understanding the value of a portfolio. Several of the employers that we work with actually, they don't really look at a degree when they have a job applicant. They're far more concerned with what someone has built. One of the ways I like to talk about it is if I was hiring someone to build me a chair, I wouldn't want to see that they had a certification in chair building, if they're a level 3 chair builder. I want to see the chairs that they've built. Have they built chairs that are sturdy, that are comfortable? And that tends to be a little more of what our employer partners are working for, and that's why we're partnering with them. Another question was on graphic design. The big piece there, we touch on working with a graphic designer. So don't expect going through the boot camp to become an expert in using Photoshop. But there are lots of things as you're building a web application where you'll need to know how to slice up a logo to make it the right size, how to start with a PSD and a design and turn that into the relevant HTML and CSS. Amanda, were there any other questions that we wanted to take at this time?
No, we'll save the rest of those for the Q&A at the end.
Okay, wonderful. So one of the big questions that we have gotten is about paying for the boot camp. Again, we understand this is a pretty big investment, both of your time and financial resources. So we've been looking at some flexible payment plans to make this a little easier to dive into. Our goal is that this investment in career is something that will pay for itself within the first year as you go into this new career. We also have some payment plans both through us here at Awesome Inc., as well as through Climb, one of our financing partners, that allow you to spread that payment out over 36 months, so you don't have to be making that upfront. We do have a few special scholarships available. One of those is through our partner, Apex Software. And one of the things that we've seen in the field of software development is really an imbalance in terms of demographics and diversity. In particular, women and minorities tend to be drastically underrepresented in software development. And that's something that our boot camp, as well as many other schools and initiatives out there, are working to make it easier for folks who are traditionally underrepresented in the field to get access to it. So a few important dates. So one, we have already begun our interviews as we continue to accept applications. This Friday, May 27th, is our application deadline. So if you have not applied yet, be sure to get your application in, hopefully today, but especially before Friday. Then we'll have August 22nd, which is when the boot camp will actually begin. Between that application deadline and the boot camp beginning, we'll be making our selections, and those folks who are selected for our fall 2016 cohort for the boot camp will begin some of the pre-work, some of the preparation that gets them ready to begin on August 22nd. And then on November 11th, we will finish up with the boot camp. We'll have interaction with employers throughout the boot camp, but that last week we'll be having our hiring day. And if I remember correctly, that happens to be 1 week before startup weekend. So we're excited to have our bootcamp cohort having an opportunity to test out their skills in that exciting event that happens in November as well. So now, Amanda, I think we're ready for Q&A, and we are excited to chat with you all about any questions you have when it comes to the application, what happens after the boot camp, some more about employers, or any other questions that you may have.
Yes, thank you, Nick. And as a reminder, you can still submit questions through the panel, but we've had a few come through. So Samuel from Lexington wants to know, what kind of job would I be qualified for after completing the boot camp?
So the typical job title, Samuel, that we see folks kind of starting off their web development career in is that of a junior web developer. When you look at career postings out there, you may see the term front-end web developer. You may see junior software developer. You may see back-end or Python Django developer or Angular JS developer. Several of those job titles have some overlap in what that means. But our goal is to prepare you throughout the boot camp for building full-stack web applications. So you may think of a website as, you know, that thing that your neighborhood association has that someone updates on WordPress and you can see when the next meeting is. What we're looking at in building web applications is a tool that other people can log into where users can exchange data, do interesting things with it. And that is the skill that a lot of companies are working for, whether it's on a consumer-facing product, something like Facebook or Twitter, or an enterprise product, working on something more like QuickBooks Online or Gmail. But that is the job title and the type of job, doing full-stack web development, starting off with the title of junior web developer.
Okay, so as far as seeing junior developer positions and the need in Lexington, can you touch on that a little bit?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things you may notice if you are looking at some of the popular posting sites out there, things like Monster or Dice, or even some of the more specific sites, which usually do a little bit better job, things like Stack Overflow jobs or AngelList. There actually are a lot more job opportunities out there than end up getting listed. And that's another one of the challenges that we're working through with our employer partners. A lot of these jobs never get listed, and it turns out that folks sometimes will go and apply for these jobs. There are a lot of recruiters out there, and employers sometimes get spammed. And especially for smaller companies, that's just more than they can handle. So a lot of these companies prefer to hire simply through their network. So we get a lot of emails with a description, and there's not always a link that's out there to one of the big job listing sites. But we are seeing great demand for these positions, and especially for people who have experience of a portfolio of work building web applications.
Thank you, Nick. Alex from Louisville wants to know, how did you determine the curriculum?
The curriculum was determined, again, by talking with our employer partners, as well as from our experience over the past several years, not only teaching software development, but doing it on our own. There are openings as well in areas like mobile app development, so things like making iPhone apps or Android apps. There's a lot of work that is done programming hardware devices, so some lower level things like C and C++. Our curriculum was selected to give kind of a broad range of experience, yet enough depth to build some real things. We selected Python and Django, one from our experience in using those, in seeing how not only versatile but widely used they are. Python is used, for instance, at the University of Kentucky for the entry-level programming classes. It's very popular in kids' classes, but it's used on a very wide range of things, from companies like Pinterest and Eventbrite and Instagram, all the way up to NASA. So having a solid foundation in things like Python, we think that's pretty great, and it's also very approachable.
Okay, Samuel, oh no, we went through that one. Josh wants to know, what would a typical day look like in the boot camp?
Yeah, so a typical day in the boot camp, we start off around 8 or 9 a.m. And when we arrive, we'll do a couple of quick programming exercises, just some things to challenge you and to get your mind working. We typically spend our mornings more of in a classroom type setting, covering new topics. So we may spend a day going over how to integrate the Bootstrap framework with a website that we have been working on. Then we take a quick break for lunch. Sometimes we'll be hanging out, maybe getting in a quick game of ping pong, or having a guest speaker come in, talking about either a technical topic or some job opportunities in the area. Then we spend our afternoons in more of a lab type environment where we'll be working on real projects, working alone on building portfolios, as well as working in teams. And then we expect some of the folks who will be most successful won't be necessarily heading home and turn their brains off at 5 p.m., but will either be reading more into a topic that has interested them, in attending different meetup groups, or maybe meeting up with their own group and working more on a project. But again, that time frame is generally 8 or 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day here at Awesome Inc. for the classes. And everyone who's part of the boot camp will be working on their own laptops, so you'll have the opportunity to work not only here at the space, but also at home. And answer one of the questions coming up there, that is Monday through Friday. So we'll be here at Awesome Inc. Monday through Friday, so just 5 days a week.
Thank you, Nick. Someone asked, if you teach JavaScript, do you teach complex forms of this coding language?
So JavaScript can be used for a lot of different things, and it is an evolving language. JavaScript, when it was originally put together, was kind of slapped together in a weekend, and has evolved into one of the most popular programming languages now in 2016. So we go with a basis in JavaScript and the ability to use it on the front end for doing things like jQuery, AngularJS, React.js. We will touch a little bit on how to use it for something like Node, which is what we call server-side JavaScript. But in general, we'll be focusing on using Python and Django for most of our server-side work. That is one of the areas. It's still pretty new. There's something called the mean stack. So if you are really interested in getting deep into JavaScript, the mean, MEAN, stack makes use of Node.js and some of the more in-depth uses of that. There will be some project opportunities, but that's not something that we focus on as part of our curriculum.
Thank you, Nick. So I'm going to give everyone just a couple more seconds to submit any last-minute questions. All right, I think we might be good. I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. And if you have any other questions, please contact us at info@awesomeincu.com. And once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording. And on behalf of Awesome Inc. and our presenters, I want to thank you for joining us today. And we hope you have a great rest of your day.